Okay. Hello, Facebook and YouTubers and anybody else that could be watching this. This is Brother Perry Williams. I'm trying a different platform today. I'm trying to do from YouTube and see if I can transfer it over to Facebook a whole lot easier than doing live videos. This is something I've been working on lately just because I wanted to be able to do them at certain times and upload them at certain times, and that way everybody gets to see what they need to see. So we're doing this from Facebook right now. We're in Daniel chapter, or from YouTube right now. We're doing this from Daniel chapter 6. Daniel chapter 6 is about the Daniel and the lion's den. Now we know that the kingdom of Babylon has been destroyed by the Medes and the Persians. They're now under Darius, the rule of Darius the Persian. And we know from history, we know that he lived about 2 years, and then Cyrus the Great took over, which was prophesied back in Daniel chapter 2. But Daniel's been promoted at this moment again. You know, he's kind of went through this rocky road. He's in his 80s, and just seems like one minute he's being kicked out, next minute he's being promoted, and so on and so forth. And he keeps interpreting these dreams. Chapter 5 was about Belshazzar, the king's and Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, who was actually a very wicked person, and God rolled on the wall and told him his kingdom was done, his days have been numbered, he'd been weighed in the balances, and his kingdom was going to be divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. And Daniel interpreted that vision of that handwriting on the wall for him. But now it's the reign of Darius the Mede. And he appointed these satraps. So when we start in verse 1, it talks about that. It talks about these, which are just provincial governors. They're there temporarily, but they're like governors to rule throughout the kingdom. He appointed 120 of them. That tells you how big this kingdom is. It's huge. And he put 3 administrators over them. And one of the administrators was Daniel. Daniel was over a whole bunch of people, okay? And the reason why he was appointed over these administrators over these provisional governors was so the king wouldn't have to worry about nothing. And so he didn't have to worry about nothing. So he went on being the king, could live his life, do what he wanted to do, and all these other people took care of everything. But here's the problem. These other administrators and these other satraps and these leaders that had been put in charge didn't like Daniel, and they decided to connive against him. And but they couldn't find anything against him. He was upright in everything he did. They couldn't find anything. There was no corruption to be found in him or anything. He was trustworthy, and they looked and looked and looked, and they finally realized the only way they're going to get something on Daniel is if it had something to do with his God. So what they did, they went to the king. All right. And they told the king, they started praising the king and all this, and he says, here's what we've done. All the administrators and all the satraps have got together, and we've decided this. You know what? You need to make a decree, an edict, which means a law underneath the Medes and the Persians, and these can't be undone. Once a king makes them, they're there forever. He says, you need to do this. You need to make sure that nobody, okay, will worship anybody, okay, for the next 30 days, except for you, O King Darius. All right, now you make that, and they can't be nothing, or they'll be thrown into the lion's den. And so Darius was like, "Okay, well, we'll do that." Darius, I guess, was kind of getting part of the power drive in him at this point. He was starting to, think, "Hey, I can do this. You know what? Nobody's going to worship anybody except for me and everything." And at this point, he doesn't really know Daniel that good. But these other leaders have watched him for a while, and they said they couldn't find anything wrong with him, so they knew they had to do something. So he put it in a law, and it couldn't be redacted. It had or repealed. It could not be taken away. It was there in place for the next 30 days that nobody could worship. So he put it in writing. Well, Daniel hears about this, okay, and he goes on, and he goes back to his house, and he does the same thing he's been doing all of his life. 3 times a day, he would go and open a window towards Jerusalem, and he would kneel down and pray 3 times at the same time. He done this faithfully, and he went, even though he knew about this decree that whoever worshipped anybody else beside the king for the next 30 days would be thrown in the lion dens. It didn't change what he did. When there's a law, a civil law, that diametrically opposes the law of God, I mean, when it just completely goes against the law of God, guess which one you choose? You have to choose the law of God, okay? He didn't go out and cause all these violence and everything, get upset and throw big riots and all this stuff. He just simply went and done the same thing he always did. And you know what happened? These men found a group, and they knew he was going to do it. They already knew everything about Daniel. They've been watching Daniel. Just like other people watch Christians, they see what they do. And this group went and found him praying at the same time he always prayed. They caught him in this. They found him doing exactly what they convinced the king that, he should write an edict that prohibits anybody from worshiping, and they went and found him doing it. But they already knew he was going to be there. That brings me to a point. I'm thinking about this, and maybe you need to think about your life right now. If they pass laws in the United States that says you can't worship anybody, you can't go to church, you can't do this, you can't do that, and some people didn't like you, and they set you up on this, and they decide they were going to go find and make sure, see if you're actually worshiping God, would they find enough evidence to convict you? In other words, it's like this. And you're going to see where I'm going here. Would they find you on Sunday morning, in church worshiping after the law was passed? Or would you still be doing whatever it is you're doing? When I was a kid, we went to church on Sunday. That's what we did. And, I brought my family up to be that way too. I've been very proud of our church and our church members and even other churches. When they said we couldn't worship in our building, and they basically tried to pass a law to do it. It was a recommendation, but this was a test run. They're going to do this sooner or later. They're going to stop all Christianity and being worshipped in the United States. All right, next statues to come down is going to be Christian statues, you watch. But if they did this, I'm proud of my church, like I said, because we never shut down services. Now, we didn't go in the building, but we showed up for church. We didn't miss a single service, and we showed up. Once we had to limit our numbers down, we said we can't do this because we're going to make it ready for anybody that wants to be here. And we did it. We did it in the parking lot until we could open up our doors again. But I'm just curious about you. If they passed a law right now and people tried to catch you in it about your dedication to worshiping God, and they tell you can't worship God, would they still find you at church on Sunday? Or would they have to search for you to find out where you're at? Food for thought. So they found Daniel there. He's, basically he's worshiping like that. And they go back to the king and say, didn't you pass a law or something like that, And now remember, Darius liked Daniel, okay? And they start, when they first did that, they set all the administrators and satraps, which I guess Darius thought, well, that includes Daniel too, that Daniel's part of this also. But Daniel wasn't part of this. It was just all the other ones. He said, didn't you pass this law that says nobody should worship? Well, Daniel, one of your administrators, one of your 3 administrators, he's defying you basically. And he goes and worships. And you know what happened there? It kind of burdened him down, okay? Because he'd put it in writing. It could not be repealed, so he had to do something. He made it so it said that if you worship, you were going to be thrown into the lion's den. Matter of fact, time we get to verse 14 of chapter 6, it talks about when the king heard this, he was greatly distressed, and he was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until the sundown to save him. Now, he couldn't change the law. So what happened then? The men went as a group, okay? They reminded him about, you have to do this, you have to throw Daniel in the lion's den. So reluctantly, Darius went and got Daniel and had him thrown into the lion's den. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of the nobles, and so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. But right before he was thrown in, you know what he was told? He says this. He said, so the king gave the order that they brought Daniel and threw him in the lion's den. Then the king said to Daniel, may your God whom you serve continually rescue you. Matter of fact, the Bible in Daniel says that he didn't rest all night. The king didn't. King was tossed and he turned, and he was very distraught at what had happened and how he had to throw Daniel in because he was tricked into doing this. But he had to do it. And I don't know whether he was praying all night or the Bible didn't say it. He was just distraught. He couldn't sleep. And then he didn't eat nothing, didn't have no entertainment. But first thing in the morning, he ran down to the tomb, okay? And when he got to the edge of there, okay, he hurried down there. It tells me he ran. And he got to the edge of the lion's den, not the tomb, the lion's den, and he called out, Daniel, was your God able to rescue you? All right? And Daniel says this, okay? He says, O king, live forever. My God sent an angel. He shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done anything wrong before you, O king. Now, you can imagine Darius. Darius was ecstatic over this, all right? He had him brought out. He was overjoyed. Gave orders to lift him up out of this, and he was lifted up out of the lion's den. There was not a wound on him, nothing, because he had trusted God. That should tell us we need to trust God more. You know what? God's got you taken care of if you trust him, all right? He's not going to miss anything. He's going to protect you through the storms and everything else. I was kind of, bad things are going to happen in your life. If things are going to, you're going to have setbacks and everything else, just like Daniel did. It's going to happen all your life. This life is hard. It really is. We planted corn this year, and I know it's kind of off subject, but I want to share with you what I'm talking about here. And the corn's the best we've ever seen. It's beautiful. It's tall. Many, many rows of it. We had a storm come through yesterday, and it looked like somebody took a hand and just twisted out the center of it and just laid about maybe about a third of it down. And I was like, well, okay, Lord gives, Lord takes away. I was a little heartbroken because the corn, I love the corn. We love to grow corn. Well, we had storms today. Guess what happened? Another storm come through. And it laid the rest of it over. Just laid it over. There's a few stalks here standing here, but out of this huge area where there's 6 huge rows of corn that are really long, there's very few standing. And I thought to myself, you know what? But, in my heart, I trust God. You know what? I was telling my secretary at church, and we were joking about it. And we were talking about everything that's going on, all the stuff I've got to do with the wedding coming up and stuff. And she says, why would you plant a garden if you've got all this stuff to do? I said, well, we like to do it. You know what I mean? But it takes a lot of time. And I don't know, maybe God's telling me, you know what? That's one less thing you have to worry about. But you know what? I still give praise to God. I trust God. You know what? If I don't have corn, that's fine too, because God's still in control. But Daniel trusted God. And any picture, I don't know if you've ever looked at pictures of lion in the Daniel in the lion's den. You know what? It always shows the lions behind Daniel, and Daniel looking out through a window or looking upward to where the opening is. That tells me that, you know what? He wasn't focused on what was behind him. He knew God was in control, so he kept focused on what God wanted him to do. He kept trusting in God. So Daniel's been brought out, okay? And he trusted him and everything. He didn't have anything. But here's what the king did. King then at that point, all right, grabbed all the people, all these men, and their families and their children that had deceived him into making him believe that all of them had come together to make this decree and etiquette. And he threw them in the lion's den. And the Bible says this: before they hit the floor, the lions overpowered them. They caught them in midair as they fell into that place. Let me tell you something. God will judge evil men. And don't ever do anything against somebody or try to trick them. And especially if they're walking with God, you better be very careful, because God will come to their protection. And just like so many times in the Bible, we've seen where people's come against God's people, where they've lost their own life because God took judgment on them for what they did that was wicked. Esther's a good story about that. And Haman and Mordecai. Haman built a gallows to hang Mordecai, a devout Jew. And you know what happened at the end? Haman was hung by his own gallows. Okay? So we find this story, but at the very end of this, I'm going to read these last few verses, okay? It says, then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, men of every language throughout the land, may you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of the kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and endures forever and ever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and saves. He performs signs and wonders in heavens and on earth, and he has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. That's Daniel chapter 6. We're getting into Daniel chapter 7, which we're going to be getting in some of the prophecies that's been foretold that was for the future, that already happened. It's still a little bit of history. It's partial history, and it's partial future events that haven't happened yet. So now we're getting back into some of the prophecy of the book of Daniel. Stay tuned with me, okay? This is Brother Perry. May God bless you, and you have a great day.